slows down and gets quiet again. I see the Lord, and He is seated on the throne of His throne. He's filling the heavens. I want to go back to that chorus for a minute. And you saw a thing he was playing up high. This time around, can you play something down a little lower, like if you were later on in the song to give it like a lower kind of a context, or if on a recording he might do one low, or if there was two guitar players in the band, electric players, maybe one would play something down lower to give it this bottom end bassy kind of beefy thing, and then he's got this high shimmery thing up top, kind of a U2 thing. So let's, I'll just play the chorus part of the song and check out some of these power chords. Surrounding His throne are thousands singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Holy, holy, holy is the play a little solo, little lead thing. Okay. Cool. I'm going to rewind that and watch that. I'm going to learn that solo.
Second. Should I recut that and just straighten all those out?
No, I like it.
I'm doing like a 2-bar thing.
Sorry.
I'm doing a 2-bar thing. I'm doing the 3 and in the first bar, and then just half notes in the first.
Okay. That'd be a great transition to come out of worship into the offering. Don't you think? Not. That's cool. Soloing, man. We're going to get into some soloing and, you know, how to do it in such a way that just brings the emotion out of people. You know, just a good solo, like a good singer, just can make you weep, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You've made me weep many times.
Well, I weep at my own playing more than you know.
You know, soloing and improvising, depends what country you're from. Some people say improvising. I prefer improvising.
That's good too.
And to me, it's like a language, you know, in that you have to first learn, like when you're learning a language, you learn a vocabulary, you learn words, one word at a time. And then you've got all these words, but what good are they unless you learn to put those words together in a way where you can actually have a conversation? In fact, some of our camera crew today is from Holland, and they're speaking Dutch as we're setting up. And interesting to hear that and how that does correlate to soloing, because soloing is you have to learn all your scales, you learn all these boring da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all these little notes where you're not really making music, you're not having a conversation, you're just learning the vocabulary of soloing. But when it gets fun is when you can actually start putting those notes together, putting those scales together, and then you're actually conversing. You're actually communicating emotion, like Glenn just was there. And so it's cool. Do you have any thoughts, like just sort of philosophy of improvising?
Well, applying it to worship, I've found it's an interesting thing because it's not so much about blowing chops once again. You know, it's not about like jazz fusion. It's about worship, you know, so you have to kind of focus when it's time to do a guitar solo. It's time to focus on your own worship. I mean, you know, the singers are worshiping, they're singing, they're leading the part, and then it's almost like your time to sort of model worship for the people too. So you kind of have to think about what's going to express the emotion of the song in your solo. And I find the best thing to do is to go to the melody, because you can't go wrong. I mean, the people know the melody. It's not like a focus on me now, I'm just going to shred something. I mean, there are times for that, but in general, I think I just go straight to the melody and then start working off of that depending on how I'm feeling, or, you know, where it's going, where the dynamics of the band are, you know, that type of thing.
I find it interesting that when we were just on the end of the last segment, we were playing I See the Lord, and you could have played something like that over that. But instead, just play a little bit of that again, how you were playing the melody. You were sort of 3, 4. That just supports the song, you know. And again, he could have ripped into that other thing he was doing, which maybe there's times where that would be appropriate, but most of the time I find that that's why I like your playing, because you either play the melody or he plays off of the melody, where he'll maybe just change 1 or 2 of the notes, but it keeps the theme, and it keeps the theme of the song and the melody kind of going in the song. So
and then if you get bored with that, you just do it in an octave higher. We can do it in an octave higher if you want.
Okay, 3, 4. Okay, but for you to get to that place, didn't you spend many, many hours just practicing these boring scales?
I did, I must confess.
You know, and for me to learn Dutch, you know, to be able to converse with these camera guys in their own language, it would require me to learn all these individual words at one time, and then it would take me a while, and I'd practice conversing, and it's the same thing with soloing. You know, it's just, you have to go through this period where you learn your scales. You learn your triads and you learn your arpeggios. Scales, triads, and arpeggios. Those are the things, there's no getting around it. And I remember a guitar teacher at Dick Grove School of Music said to me once, thinking he was encouraging me, but he said, you know, the only difference between you and Larry Carlton, Paul, or you and Phil Keaggy, I forget what he said, is about 500 hours of concentrated practice time. And he said, you can put in those 500 hours in 10 years, or you can put those 500 hours in over 5 years or over 2 years. But you can't get around putting the time in of just going over and over, getting these things in your hands and in your head. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, it's a progression. I think, you know, I still work on it to this day. I hear those players and I'm totally inspired, and I just think, man, it inspires me to continue to, you know, practice.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's look at some of those, look at the scales and some of the things that you've used to get your hands to where you can do that.
One of the things that helped me was to change my scales rather than single position scales, like let's take G scale for example, to make them 3-note per string scales, like That way it gave me more room to play the scale. I can see the shape a little better because it's more uniform and I'm not stuck in one position all the time. And so I would take this scale and just practice, you know, up and down. And then I would practice sequences like a...
Slow that down.
I'm not sure if I can play it slow. I'll give it a shot. And the same going down.
Mm-hmm.
So up to speed would be...
And so that's a G major scale,
It's a
starting
G
on your
major
index
scale.
finger. If you move that up
It'd be
to
A
the
major.
5th fret, A major, same shape. By the way, that is what's so cool about guitar, don't you agree? The cool thing about guitar is that you can just move those shapes up and down the neck and it's the same fingering. Whereas piano, man, they got to relearn all the different black keys. So I think that's one of the really cool things about guitar.
But if you're not paying attention, it can also be the really uncool thing. Like if you think you're on one fret and you're not.
I hate when that happens.
Me too.
So I noticed that primarily, though, you play more pentatonic type scales. And pentatonic, penta meaning five-note scales. It seems like a lot of the, you know, the rock players, blues players, that seems to be enough. And I notice you primarily play off of that. Is that true?
I think mainly because scales, if you play scales and solos, it tends to sound more like an exercise, kind of like that, you know? You know, that type of idea. Whereas pentatonics, the fact that there's less notes in it means it's going to be wider, there's more room for a melody to happen. But the pentatonic shape, taking, let's say, a minor pentatonic, there's the 5 notes. But again, that sounded kind of boring to me. If you use any kind of sequence like you can really experiment with these because they're very angular type shapes. Like one thing I really enjoyed was
Can you slow that down for our viewing audience?
you know, gives it just a cool sound
Right.
to it.
You can get so much mileage out of that shape. I mean,
Absolutely.
just show a few, like, you know, the Clapton licks, the classic rock licks, 3 or 4
Yeah,
of
if you
those.
add bending
they're
to
all
it.
in there.
If you add the blue note, which is
Not all of us can play as fast as Glenn, so don't feel bad if I think we need to stop and take a closer look and slow things down just to make sure that you have this position under your fingers. So for the minor pentatonic scale, you start with your index finger right there on the root. So if it's an A minor pentatonic, then you start with your index finger. And we'll start on the low E and go. Okay? Start off slow. Someday you'll play as fast as Glenn if you practice a lot. Now some people like to, you know, and you'll see Glenn do that because then you can bend later down the road. But for now, each finger is assigned a fret, basically. Now let's take a look at the right hand for a minute. And you know, you can pick straight down. Get used to doing that. And then alternate picking, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Okay, and really you don't have to move your arm, you're just kind of moving this area. So get that under your fingers, then you move down and you start with that with your pinky, and it's and there's your A major. Got that? And just sing little ideas. I mean, at first it might seem silly, but that's where it starts, getting to sing your improvisation ideas. Okay, and the only difference, and let's go back to this minor one, A minor, and you'll know our last scale is the blues scale, and just by adding that flat fifth that Glenn talked about. So there you are, blues, man. That's all B.B. King plays right there. Also, the concept of vibrato, noticed, you'll see Glenn do this a lot. And that's vibrato. And instead of just going, it's not much going on there, not much interest, okay? So, there's slow vibrato or there's fast vibrato. Try just a little bit of movement there. Putting pressure down on the fretboard. See, I'm pushing down on the fretboard and kind of just giving it a little bit of a wiggle, and that's vibrato, and that gives the note much more feeling. So, also slides are another thing to give it feeling. Instead of just going, you can go like, where you start on this note, and you hit the note, and then slide it up without re-articulating it with your right hand. So you're going. And then you can go, add a little vibrato. Now there's another concept called a hammer-on. So go through these going, where instead of striking this note, these notes here, I'm just going to kind of hammer on. With my left hand, I'm going to strike this note and then hammer on. Okay? These are all little things that give the notes more feeling. Or you can use your pinky if you want. It's a little harder. There's also this kind of vibrato, especially when you're on this string and it'll tend to fall off. So you can go side to side. You hear that little bit of a shake in the note? So incorporate those things as you practice these pentatonic scales. Hammer-ons, slides, and vibrato. And the last thing will be bending, where you actually, and you know, we take that for granted, but the first time you do it, it's hard. So you start there, and then you bend the note up to the next note. So that's the note that you want to get to. So you go. And then same thing here. 2. Okay. So try those things. Slides, hammer-ons, bends, vibrato. That's the thing that makes this little scale so expressive. Just kind of noodle in that area right there.
Okay.